Good morning. สวัสดีครับ Good morning from Bangkok, Churankorn. My name is Thitinan Pongsuchirat. I'm the director of the Institute of Security International Studies at the Faculty of Political Science at Churankorn University in Bangkok. Welcome to our webinar today. We have an online, completely online, virtual webinar, even though the campus has reopened and we'll be having more and more in-person events combined with streaming. But for this morning, we have an online event because we have speakers from Indonesia beaming in, and also from Cambodia. And then we also have from Thailand. So for today, I think there's a lot of interest now, a lot of headlines and dynamics and contours and a lot of developments in geopolitics, geoeconomics, around the world, certainly led by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Recently, we have had an ASEAN-US summit, second special US-ASEAN summit. And this took place in Washington, D.C. It generated a lot of headlines, but it was seen also as a symbolic. I mean, there were some announcements, including the upgrade of the US-ASEAN strategic partnership to a comprehensive strategic partnership. There was also an announcement of $150 million US investment in infrastructure in ASEAN. But short of that, I mean, beyond that, we did not hear as much. I mean, there were usual topics about issues about China, of course, Myanmar, the crisis after the military coup in February last year, and then cooperation on health, COVID recovery, this and that. But I'm just wondering if this second special summit following the first special summit that President Obama hosted in Sunnylands in 2016, if this one in 2022, just last week, produce as many optics as had been anticipated. I also would note that ASEAN this time was represented not by 10 member states, 10 leaders, but only 8. The Philippine president, outgoing President Duterte, did not join, and of course we have a contested leadership issue in Myanmar after the coup. Who represents Myanmar is contested. So we're going to look at this to begin with, kind of the US-ASEAN context, ASEAN itself. The topic for today, of course, is beyond just ASEAN. We're looking at the summits. Well, we're having a summit season coming up, and the summit season in Asia normally takes place in November, and it has ASEAN in the front and center role. So ASEAN normally is the chief architect of regional cooperation for peace and security and stability and prosperity. And when the summit season comes, we will see 3 ASEAN countries hosting the major summits. First, in Cambodia, ASEAN-Related Summit. And this features the East Asia Summit. But then right after that, there will be a G20 summit hosted by Indonesia, prospectively in Bali. And then Thailand will host the APEC summit. Back to back, the whole span of these 3 summits is about a week, maybe up to 10 days. It's designed to allow major world leaders to attend within that span without having to go back home. They can sort of hop around and shuttle around the region to attend these summits. We have a spanner in the works because these summits now, the big issue, apart from ASEAN, Myanmar, South China Sea, US-China. The biggest spanner now is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And therefore, the attendance at these summits who will join. In Indonesia, I think, has taken the lead in making it very clear that both the Russian leader, President Putin, and also the Ukrainian leader, Mr. Zelensky, they both have been invited. So this is something that's, I think, is protrusive. It's very clear that Indonesia has invited them both, and we will see what happens there. And then we have the Cambodia, hosting the ASEAN-related summits. I haven't heard yet who's been invited and so on. and then APEC comes last. So in a way, Thailand is not at the forefront in organizing this summit season. I think partly to wait and see what happens, and also taking a cue from the Cambodians and Indonesian leadership to see how they organize it. So today we have sort of two parts to our webinar today. I think first we'll look at the latent effects, the impact from the takeaways from the US-ASEAN summit in Washington recently, and then we'll look beyond that into the summit season. A view from Cambodia, my good friend and colleague, long-standing Ambassador Pusotirak, and then we'll move to the G20, with a view from Dr. Rizal Sukma, who used to be Indonesian ambassador in London, and also a long-time friend, academic, scholar. He's a senior fellow with the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Jakarta. Ambassador Sotirak is the head of the CICP Cambodian Institute for Cooperation and Peace. And then finally, we'll come to the APEC kind of framework, what's happening there with the senior fellow of ISIS Thailand, Kun Kavi Chongkitawan. So as a preface, kind of a lead-in to this webinar, let me first invite Ambassador Sotirak a little bit to talk about, the highlights or maybe takeaways in your view. The Prime Minister Hun Sen's visit to Washington. There was some protests against him or aimed at him that we've seen in the world news, Ambassador Sotirak. So there's also even domestic politics evident in this latest US-ASEAN summit. And then from your vantage point at this, in this first round on the US-ASEAN, what are your kind of takeaways? Was it too symbolic? Was there enough substance to it from the Cambodian view? And Cambodia this year is a chair of ASEAN, and Prime Minister Hun Sen, this may be the last time he gets to chair ASEAN because of his advancing age and his plan to pass on the leadership to the next generation. So, Ambassador Sotirak, may I please first invite you to just maybe share with us your views, your observations about the recent US-ASEAN summit. Was there much to it? What's your view?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Ajahn Titinan, my good friend, for inviting me to engage in this very timely discussion among other two prominent speakers who are also very good friends, and Kavi. So I'm very pleased to take part in this webinar, and let me share with you my view regarding the summit. Of course, if somebody follow, I like to begin with re-emphasizing what the U.S. President said about the summit. I think this is a good starting point. And according to him, the ASEAN-US partnership is entering a critical stage. And he highlighted the need for an Indo-Pacific that is free and open, stable and resilient and secure, and where the rule and norm that have made possible so much growth and prosperity and stability in health and strengthen, including respect for the rule of law and human rights. All this is the code. This is exactly what he said, I think a day before the summit started. And to me, these are the premise within which the U.S. intend to engage ASEAN in a new phase of their relationship, and we now talking about comprehensive strategic partnership centering for free and open Indo-Pacific. So my first point here, I'm kind of questioning ASEAN. Are we ready? Are we prepared to embrace this? Because comprehensive strategic partnership will be in accordance to what I have just said. I invite everybody to visit or to read his statement again, President Biden. Now, with regard to ASEAN, I'm trying very hard to read over and over again the chair statement, the chair press statement on 12 and 13, and also the joint vision statement. I will not repeat what they say. Please do read it again and again. I read it about 10 times. And from reading it, I feel that ASEAN is still lack clarity. Sorry to say this. I'm not trying to be hard on ASEAN, but I'm just trying to make sure the glass half empty be filled with ASEAN centrality here. I feel that the ASEAN is still lack clarity on how the bloc intend to engage the US and open up Southeast Asia for greater America footprint to counter China's assertive behavior in this part of the world. Now, without a clear convictions to persuade Washington that Southeast Asia is an important region that is receptive to the US preeminent engagement, ASEAN cannot count totally on the US to boost the bloc's own centrality and strengthen its reputation as a credible regional driver that is willing to engage strategically with the US in order to address a broad range of regional and global challenges at a time when security and economic outlook remain uncertain and volatile, not only in this region but globally. So I'm not sure that these statements really convince the US that ASEAN is an honest broker, neutral actor that can push for an effective rule-based order in a much-needed multilateral framework based on a liberal international system that we know of. So these are my point. I think that the American already put a parameter, a boundary through which the American would work with ASEAN, but the free and open Indo-Pacific is a parameter. So my point here is that, are we ready? Is ASEAN ready? In reading this statement, I'm not seeing it very clearly. There's mentioning of AOIP, but I think AOIP it's a process. It's still going on, and it's not as elaborate as the so-called the American Indo free and open Indo-Pacific strategy that the White House and the Pentagon roll out. So I stop here if there's more needed to talk about this. These are just the point that I want to bring to the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sotirak. Let me just follow up with a 1 minute kind of question, Ambassador Sotirak. And I'll just say to our audience, viewers, you may post questions, comments along the way in the Facebook live stream. There's a space for it. Ambassador Sotirak, you mentioned, I think it's a very good point. And I think that's something we have to ask ourselves. What has ASEAN got itself into? I mean, ASEAN went to Washington. President Biden hosted this second summit, and there was a kind of a joint statement and everything. And the upgrade, the elevation to the comprehensive strategic partnership, your point that about ASEAN's preparedness, readiness, and what to make of this new upgrade, new relationship, moving up to the comprehensive strategic partnership. Is it a U.S. maneuver, effort to try to entice ASEAN to its side in the U.S.-China rivaling competition? Is this a way of kind of attracting ASEAN or pressuring ASEAN to take sides in the U.S.-China competition and rivalry? I think that's something that we should entertain in this webinar and other discussions. Is ASEAN being made to pick a side, to choose sides? Also, the Indo-Pacific strategy that the Biden administration has announced, the interesting thing about the Indo-Pacific strategy that they had before the Russian invasion of Ukraine is that it actually mentioned, the ASEAN centrality, ASEAN mechanisms, and so on. But at the summit in Washington, we heard less, as you noted, Ambassador Sotirak, less about the AOIP, the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, less about the ASEAN centrality and so on. It was a little bit more kind of the US FOIP. So I mean, just to follow up with this, what do you think of this? I mean, was it a kind of the US maneuver to pressure or to entice ASEAN to take its side in this rivaling competition, Indo-Pacific strategy, countervailing China? What do you think?
You want my response, Ajahn?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I think you're asking the right question, but let me share my view about this. Why is this so? Why I'm saying that the American is not really impressed, or we have not convinced the US that we the credible driver. ASEAN still lack collective leadership. This has been an ongoing struggle, and possess less than satisfied effective global voice on matters related to hard security issues. The South China Sea featured prominently and ongoing since so many years ago, and it's going to be here for a long time forward. And also Myanmar issues is now not going very well with ASEAN centrality and ASEAN as a credible driver for stabilizing even among a neighboring country, among the family of ASEAN. We are not able to do much. One of the biggest challenges to us, ASEAN, is how to instill the regional interest over and above individual country interest. This is very hard to do. When I said this, owing to the nature of ASEAN itself, they not yet. We are not the EU. We are not the European Union, who have very solid rule base, even a bylaw. They have an assembly to govern themselves. The charter itself needs to be reformed, need to be revived to be able to address current issues. How dispute settlement mechanism among states on hard security issues are not there. We don't really know what to do with Myanmar, for example, and now Ukraine you mentioned. So individual ASEAN states may not opt for their imperative to allow their national interests to be superseded by regional interests, and that's why we continue to see until today, issues that ASEAN have not very clear. We want to have consensus, but unity is not there. Centrality is weak when we don't have a clear regional vision. And when you engage with the American, when they say free and open Indo-Pacific, and here are the criteria through which are we ready? Like you were asking, do we know what we get ourselves into? It is it going to be more beneficial or maybe more liability to ASEAN? If we were to count on, if we were to have some buy-in with the Indo-Pacific strategy, of which one of the things that they do that is to well, I have to use this word, contain China now. It's not advertised, but I'm using it so literally. Because in the Indo-Pacific strategy, they define very clearly what threaten American national security interests. Russia, China, and terrorism. You read it, these three is identified there. AOIP, you read through it, we don't really know what challenge ASEAN, what is the threat perceptions in ASEAN. It's very broad, it's very general, state stability, peace, don't resort to military actions, consultation, diplomacy, the usual. So I think the Americans are not impressed with what ASEAN brings to the table when we want to do comprehensive, and you will continue to get the Americans to push for the acceptance of the American way of settling whatever is going to be a flashpoint here, be it South China Sea or Myanmar.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador. the big announcement also, the buzzword was from President Biden was a new era, comprehensive strategic partnership. But I think your point here is that the U.S. seems to have the U.S. has a game plan. It has a game plan, but it's unclear whether ASEAN has a game plan. And if it were to come up with a game plan, what that game plan would be. So I think that's a very good first point. Ambassador Sotrak, when we come back to the second round, we'll be interested to hear anything you can share from the capital of Cambodia, your network, policy networks within your CICP and so on. What's the thinking in Cambodia? Were they happy with the summit in Washington? And beyond that, what's Cambodia's plans going forward to the summit season when Cambodia, as chair of ASEAN, has to host all these leaders' meetings? Okay, let me move to Ambassador Rizal Sukma. Ambassador Rizal, Indonesia. What's the sentiment or kind of Indonesia has a game plan. I think Indonesia has a game plan, but maybe ASEAN doesn't have a game plan. Indonesia has a game plan because for the G20, for example, it has come out and say it is going to invite both sides, Ukraine, Russia. And I think when Indonesia attends and joins these meetings, including Washington, for Indonesia, it seems like Indonesia would like ASEAN to go in certain places, and it has a kind of a vision of the future. But I think ASEAN maybe is constrained inside, maybe too divided, maybe too weak. Is that the case? Are there some frustrations in the Indonesian capital? Just on the Indonesian view on the recent U.S. ASEAN summit, Dr. Rizal, what do you think? What's happened there in Washington from your seat?
Well, thank you. First of all, Dr. Titinan, for having me, in this discussion with old friends such as the Ambassador Posutirak and also Kun Kavi. I think it's always been a pleasure, to have a session like this and discuss, the future of ASEAN and other international affairs issues. Well, let me begin by saying that, I completely agree with Dr. Titinan's article in Bangkok Post that the summit was good because it happened, because, we knew that it's been a delayed schedule, and that's also the summit that, took place after the first one, which was like, I think, many years ago. So it's good because it happened. But having said that, so I think I have the impressions that it's more like symbolic. I have the impression that President Biden was like reluctantly organizing that summit, because he had a catch up to play. So if you look at the entire summit and related issues around the summit, especially before the summit, when the Cambodian officials, our good friend Ko Kim Hon, mentioned that it's not enough time given to ASEAN leaders and so on. So again, it reinforced the impression that ASEAN is a footnote in American foreign policy. So in that context, of course, it make it difficult for any Southeast Asian countries to be sure that the two key issues in U.S. engagement in Southeast Asia has been resolved. The first one, of course, the question of sustainability of the engagement. So I think a lot of people still raise some doubt that the U.S. might not be able to continuously engage ASEAN countries because of the domestic politics. And a lot of people also worried that 2024 President Trump would come back, and then of course all this talk about new era in ASEAN and the US will be gone again. The second issue is, I think, the questions about the reliability of American presence in the region. So the question is still, is the US is a full-time power in the regions or just a part-time power who can get distracted very easily by other issues in other part of the world? So the summit, in my view, has not been able to address that, I think, two key issues in the mind of many people in Southeast Asia, including in Indonesia. The fourth point that I would like to also mention, I think it's unfortunate that the real issues and opportunity to deepen and reset ASEAN-US relationships has, I think has been overshadowed by this, a discussion and ridicule of the US 150 millions pledge, to ASEAN, ASEAN countries. So instead of like focusing on how we can move forward and how we can follow up the summit, and a lot of people, get actually bogged down in that, discussion, in that unproductive debate, about the US 150 millions pledge in order to contain China and so on. So, so that's actually diminish the possible positive trajectory of post, ASEAN US summit, and in fact, it reinforced the perception of US decline. It reinforced the US, the belief that the US only focus on China, and their focus on China really defines American policy toward Southeast Asia. So this is, I think, is really unfortunate, because at the end, the bottom line is that the summit and the discussion after the summit in ASEAN capitals really show that the US and ASEAN do not know what they want with each other. So I think this is the thing that we need to really address, in order to have a clear relationship between US and Southeast Asia on its own, not defined by the issue like in Ukraine, and also in issue of the role of China in the region.
Okay, thank you very much. Now that COVID-19 restrictions have eased, we are seeing more travel, overseas travel, and in-person meetings. So, for example, if this second summit had taken place virtually, we would have probably have heard also from the Philippines, it would have been included or be present. But now that we back into the kind of traveling mode, having this kind of real summits in person, it'll be an issue who comes and who does not come. So I think that's something to note, that we're going to the kind of the after COVID now, and the in-person summits, in-person meetings are back, and this is something that is new over the last 2 years. Now you mentioned the many good points, but the reliability, how it came off. The US now, Dr. Rizal Sukma, is engaged not just the Indo-Pacific, but it's back in the Atlantic Alliance, right? Fully. So I think maybe partly the Washington summit was designed to show that the US is still committed, still has the can walk and chew gum at the same time, can be involved in the European continent, fighting back against the Russians in Ukraine, providing weapons and assistance, at the same time still engaging ASEAN in the Indo-Pacific. But I think in the longer term, your point will be apt, that reliability is an issue. That's first. And then second, whether, is it all about China for the US around here? That's something that also is an impression we get. For ASEAN, it's not all about China. It's about many, many things. But for the US, maybe it's all about China, and that's something else. We'll come back to you, Dr. Rizal Sukma, for the real summit season 6 months from now. We're just anticipating and looking at the issues, challenges, and prospects in a longer term, ahead of time a little bit. Let me go now to Kun Kavi. Kun Kavi, you've written and spoken extensively about this US-ASEAN second summit. In fact, it was a postponement, rescheduling. Right? It was rescheduled from late March, and that late March planned meeting was also there was some controversy in it, because we don't know if Washington had come up with the dates that ASEAN cannot meet, or something happened there in March. So now we have had it postponed to May. Did anything surprise you from this second special summit, Kun Kavi, especially compared to the first special summit that President Obama hosted. Obama was different because he was really invested in ASEAN, in the region. He attended all these summits, I think at least 11 times. He was personally invested, and also in terms of policy, it was sustained, and there were initiatives and so on. So that was the first, and I feel like maybe the second one was a little bit ad hoc, maybe sort of trying to pick up where Obama left off, but it didn't quite come off that way. What do you think, Kun Kavi? Your takeaways from the second U.S. ASEAN Special Summit last week?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Titinan, for the invitations. I think the second special ASEAN-US summit has served its purpose. Like Dr. Rizal and Sotirak has said, that it was good that it happened. You cannot compare to the first one because Obama personally craft and invite the ASEAN leader. The reason why it takes too long to fix the schedule because of the United States lack of coordination between National Security Council, the White House, and the State Department. You should ask Pak Rizal how difficult it is for Retno as a coordinator of Indonesia and United States to fix up the date. So I think it's very good that it happened. I would like to take a different assessment because people tend to evaluate ASEAN's engagement with major power. ASEAN does have grand plan, especially with major power. With United States, you watch carefully. This time the engagement is, I think, ASEAN controlled the narrative, at least from the joint visions statements. I must give credit to Indonesia as a coordinator because in the earlier draft, the first zero draft, United States put a lot of things, and ASEAN refused to add that. ASEAN as a coordinator want input from 10 countries. And I was happy that over the 8 pages, over 200, 2,000, over 500 words, it's much longer than the 2 pages, 70-point statement on Sunnyland. It's very detailed. And it was good in the sense that, number one, this time, ASEAN-US relation is no longer on the autopilot mode. At least Biden will be in charge. He appoint ambassador to ASEAN after almost 5 years, 6 years of vacancy. Johannes Ambrams, I think it's a good one. And you have someone in Jakarta that would have the ear of President Biden. It's very important. You don't have that for the past 5 years. No wonder US ASEAN has nothing to hope for. And secondly, I think with the leader in charge, as you well aware, ASEAN is a top-down organization. So when you have leaders meeting and leaders talk to each other, it's good. Of course, one complaint that ASEAN leaders have is that in Washington, you have only 10.5 hours. And we thought that we will have the whole US cabinet meeting with ASEAN leaders. There are a lot of negotiations going on. And it was good that in the end, ASEAN had some of the, I would say, some quality time with key cabinet minister, energies, vice president. They don't have bilateral, which is good because otherwise it will be transactional. During the postponed summit planned by President Trump, it was the opposite. President Trump wants to focus on bilateral meeting instead of collective. So if you know the evolution of what ASEAN tried to do, try to encourage the format so that ASEAN can meet American side on the collective bodies, as a unit, you will appreciate what ASEAN has done. Okay, I think this is very important. A lot of people ignore this kind of sensibility. And I think I have to give credit to coordinator because Jack Sullivan are very push hard on the U.S. Position. Now on AOIP, I think I have a different take. After several adjustments, Americans' Indo-Pacific strategy has changed a lot, focusing much more on non-security, which is good. And I think from now on, the ASEAN AOIP will play the leading role in absorbing all the various Indo-Pacific framework. You have, of course, Japan is very clear, and I think also India very clear. The wording, there are two wording that are very important. Synergies and implementation. For a long time, and I think Pak Rizal know that ASEAN refused to use the word synergy because we realize that AOIP is an independent guideline to engage external power. We are not part of an American Indo-Pacific strategy. They are part of us. We are taking what they offer in. And now Indonesia has already come up with a plan to operationalize. We have set up priorities. Our priorities, as you know, is maritime cooperation, connectivity, sustainable development, and finally on economics and other matter. We have grand plans, but a lot of people didn't know, and ASEAN will not say anything until the last minute because we have to go for consensus. As you know, we are pretty diverse. We have different views, but once we make a decision, it's always a consensus, even though it's the lowest denominator, people laugh about it, but I still give credit to ASEAN. You know, we will not retract from whatever decision. So AOIP is going forward. ASEAN will take the lead. Already Indonesia has come up with some idea. I think it's a good idea. If any project has been adopted, you will have leaders who will be the driver of the whole project, so everybody will get in. That's pretty good. So I will not go into details. Now another element is this: America did not come out and explains the so-called Indo-Pacific economic frameworks. You know, America is still trying to engage ASEAN in the most comprehensive way, especially on the thing that they are not willing to give. For example, trade access, market access to ASEAN, even though, you know, ASEAN want more access to American market. So this Indo-Pacific economic framework will be announced during the summit, Quad Summit in Tokyo. But I think there will not be any details. The issue is, will any ASEAN member join the so-called IPEF? I think some will join because this new framework is very rules, very quite simple. You can join whenever you can, or whatever you want to do in 6 areas, you know, like you have the so-called supply chain resilience, infrastructures, decarbonizations and green energies, and facilitating fair and worker-centric trade, that sort of thing. So you can pick and choose. I have to see what would be the detail. So ASEAN is very careful. And as you know, ASEAN put on hold United States comprehensive strategic partnership for good reason, to show you that, you know, we still think about it. You know, we need a proper assessment of your role. That's the way. ASEAN is not giving away easily. And there are other countries. India has already applied. And India has gained some respect from ASEAN, from its firm position, stand up against external power, which is something that ASEAN would like to emulate. So I think there's a lot of positive developments after this summit. Of course, I agree with Rizal. America has problem with sustainability of good policy. Talks, some action whenever it fits them. That is the problem, reliability. But I think with Johannes Abram, with ambassador in Jakarta, I think there will be more action, more activity. In recent years, since 2016, CPR, Committee of Permanent Representatives, have played important role in shape ASEAN policy. Of course, certainly, senior official level is still important. But of late, given this, for example, joint vision statement, CPR has played very important role. And I think Pak Rizal can confirm about this trend. So when you have this ambassador from all major player dialogue partner in Jakarta, and now you have a new building, they can react, they can shape, they can put up a policy that impact on ASEAN. Finally, very good point. I think America often and always view ASEAN as accessory to the ASEAN-China rivalry. It's a big mistake. But as you can see, United States has very careful in producing the narrative. Senior officials do not mention China that much, only unnamed source that try to use this US-ASEAN rivalry. It would be a mistake for Americans to look at ASEAN as just one component in the global strategy against China. It will not work. I can tell you, ASEAN will not do that. Just look at Russia. Even Russia, ASEAN will not give in because we have our own principle. ASEAN already have invited all three ASEAN hosts have already invited Russia to participate in their summit. But of course, it depends on them whether they will join. I will stop here. Thank you, Ajahn Thitinan.
Thank you very much, Kun Kavi. Yeah, I think we talk about ASEAN, and almost by definition as a think tank, analysts, scholars over the decades. We are big ASEAN fans, but I think we talk about ASEAN now. It's a different kind of ASEAN, isn't it, compared to earlier ASEAN, the ASEAN that joined the summit, second summit. Only 8 countries, not 10, and I think that we'll have ASEAN 9 indefinitely now in big world meetings, not ASEAN 10. So the nature of ASEAN itself, I think, has to be looked at, and over the years, I think we have to face up to the challenges of what to do about this division between U.S.-China, South China Sea, the Myanmar coup has to be addressed. So I think I myself, and I think all of us here, and probably all of our audience members would like ASEAN to do well. We are big cheerleaders and big fans and big boosters, but there's some internal problems and challenges that we also have to confront. I'll just pick up on 2 points from Louis that you mentioned about the statement that came out of it. This is a good point because there actually were a lot of details. I was surprised. A lot of details on public diplomacy, on scholarships, a lot of soft power stuff that the U.S. really kind of abandoned during the Trump administration. Now the Biden administration seems to be picking up a lot of public diplomacy scholarships, exchanges, people to people, and this is actually spelled out in this statement. And then the IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, in my view, that should have been the highlight of this second U.S.-ASEAN summit. And IPEF is designed not like the TPP earlier. It's not going to go through congressional approval, so it'll be more limited in scope. But I thought that it would have been the highlight or takeaway instead of this $150 million pledge, because $150 million pledge it came across as very meager when the U.S. is expending or assisting Ukraine with tens of billions of dollars, right? And it turns around have this ASEAN summit, and here you go, investment of 150 million. So I think IPEF, by the way, Vietnam, Malaysia, a little bit cautious on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Philippines and Singapore are all for, but the other countries we haven't heard from yet, including Thailand. So I think IPEF is really the key plank, and you have to focus on certain niches. It's not going to be a comprehensive, substantive like TPP or even RCEP. So let's see what they come up with, IPEF in Tokyo. Now let me move. You mentioned Khun Kavi already about the hosting of the three countries hosting these summits and already inviting the different leaders. Have we all invited? Maybe we can get some confirmations here about the dates and about who's been invited, and the invitees. The chief invitee that many people are keeping an eye on is President Putin. Whether President Putin will be invited to Cambodia, to Indonesia, to Thailand. Indonesia, we already know he has been invited. But the other two countries, maybe we get some confirmations. And then maybe in this second round, what can we anticipate? What are some of the dynamics that are emerging, 6 months ahead of time? And, 6 months can be a long time, will be a long time. We don't know if this Ukraine-Russia war will be, conclude by then. It's already been about almost 3 months, and it seems to be dragging on. So there is some spanner in the works, a lot of uncertainties leading into the summit season in November for the ASEAN three key countries that are hosting them. Maybe we come first to Ambassador Sotirak. Ambassador Sotirak, Cambodia comes up first. Cambodia is the chair of ASEAN. There will be ASEAN-related summits with dialogue partners and so on. There's a bunch of meetings. Maybe you can first share with us, first maybe to confirm the dates, and I know it's in mid-November, and then Prime Minister Hun Sen, what's his kind of game plan? Inviting Putin too, or inviting? What about President Zelensky? Is there a concern that the other major leaders, world leaders, will not attend, will not join? Is there a concern about boycott if President Putin comes? How does Cambodia intend to proceed as the ASEAN chair? Ambassador Sotirak. We can't hear you. I think you're on mute. Ambassador Sotirak, if you can hear us.
Yes. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. So what I will do for you is that I will give my personal assessment on Cambodia role as ASEAN chair from now on until the end. You already know from the beginning, first 6 months. And this will be my candid view. I will be a bit blunt here. For the sake of solicit more discussions and how Cambodia intend to handle the summit in November as follows. First and foremost, Achan, you correctly in mentioning, I also believe that Cambodia's chairmanship this year is about Prime Minister Hun Sen's legacy. And this is might be the last summit that he will chair ASEAN. The next chair of ASEAN will be 10 more years. And if any friend to Cambodia or people who are interested in Cambodia next leadership, Prime Minister Hun is actively promoting his son. At the moment, everybody knows this is not a secret, but if it is a secret, it's an open secret, just for the sake of information. But so it will be Prime Minister Hun Sen's legacy. One of the most important things that Cambodia will pay attention to and cannot afford to have the recurrence of the 2012 incident that brand Cambodia as a spoiler to ASEAN unity. and insinuated that the Cambodian foreign policy is too close to China. And this is something that I don't think it will ever again happen. There will definitely, in my view, a joint communique after the meeting, be it on South China Sea or otherwise, with regard to this statement. I mean, but we have to wait and see how credible or how extensive this joint communique is all about. We just have to wait and see. There's many undercurrent that can shape, reshape, or negotiate and renegotiate before the wording is coming out, as everybody probably knows. Cambodia now is wiser and has continued to adopt its foreign policy of being more friendly, and by being more friendly, I'm talking about more pragmatic to all power, and also responsive to the current challenges the challenges and concern of region in a regional context. In other words, Cambodia is fully aware of the flashpoint that is being rolled out and continue to exist, including post-COVID recovery aspect or post-COVID world order, so to speak. We are talking about U.S.-China rivalry here. For this year's chairmanship, Cambodia is more committed to enhance ASEAN relevance and aspire to be responsible member of ASEAN in good standing. I must say this as well, because if you know the theme of the ASEAN chairmanship today is ACT, addressing challenge together. I mean, we don't talk, we want to act. You know, when you act, there might be something coming out good, you know, maybe not good, but also maybe good. So let's see until the end of the year. That's my first point. So no, don't worry about no joint communique in my reading. There will be a joint communique, but how extensive, how impactful, we just have to wait and see. But one caution though, don't always blame on the chair, because it's a collective bargaining exercise among other members of ASEAN and China, if we were to talk about the South China Sea issues. Now, during ASEAN leader meeting in November, we talked about who to invite here. Cambodia hoped to welcome all power, such as US, Russia, China, Japan, including Western European Union power, you know, wherever and whenever in whatever framework is ASEAN have initiated, is very much, we want to invite all, because as I said, this is a legacy Prime Minister sent. This will give more credibility to the chair, and also you talk about domestic audiences that often watch if major big country are not or boycott the summit or something, that this is a no good sign for Cambodia, because issues related to human rights or democracy, and it's even more important in the Cambodian context, not just because I think it is a legacy of Prime Minister Sen, but also next year there will be national elections. So we want to invite all. I don't think that Cambodia entertain the idea of not inviting the Russia, but Russia is a member of the EAS, unless Russia himself doesn't want to come. You know, there might be a possibility that Putin don't want to come. I rarely see Putin attending the summit. You know, we have been asking foreign minister, Russian foreign minister on his behalf. If my recollection is correct, maybe we can prove me wrong about this. So this is my line. But also, Cambodia have to be mindful with the fact that, you know, we talk about Ukraine. I will have a word about Ukraine, but because of the American state position on Ukraine, if Putin is there at the EAS, President Biden may not come, because it's about Ukraine. It's not about the EAS. You see what I'm saying? But I don't know. It's too early to say. There's still, I think there will be a lot of shuttle diplomacy with regard to these issues. With regard to Myanmar crisis, this is also top issues that I think will be discussed. Achieving progress even a little bit is worthwhile in my view with regard to the current issue related to the crisis. Because Myanmar crisis is currently the top political security concern in the region. To us, nearby is Myanmar. Globally, maybe Ukraine, but to ASEAN, I think Myanmar issues. In fact, in my view, any progress in making the implementation of the ASEAN 5-point consensus will go down well on Cambodian ASEAN chairmanship. If by November, the ASEAN special envoy is able to break the ice and with the junta and who in turn would allow the delivery of humanitarian assistance to affected populations and also allow to have perhaps a serious meeting with member of NUG plus the other belligerent stakeholder as much as possible, then I think the 5-point consensus can be declared as, although not complete success, but partially success. This will be a long process. It's not going to all the 5 points will be achievable in my view in Cambodian chairmanship. But I'm saying that the easiest way is to deliver humanitarian system. Okay, and then South China Sea issues may be something that you might also want to hear. My point on this with regard to Cambodian position is that recently Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman announced that ASEAN will conduct a face-to-face consultation with China on the code of conduct in the dispute South China Sea, and this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for Cambodia to reopen the formal consultations on the COC process. As chair, Cambodia can reignite what had been left off and encourage ASEAN to be more resolute and concretely engage China to maintain strong political will and commitment to swiftly implement the DOC first through joint cooperative and activity, and to continue to keep momentum and dialogue and consultation so as to enhance trust, confidence, and cooperation, as well as to work together harder for an early adoption of a credible and binding COC for the South China Sea. I have one more point, if you allow me to make, about how Cambodia would view external power or partner. Cambodia's role as ASEAN chair this year will be evaluated by external power on Phnom Penh's ability to enforce ASEAN leadership. A minute ago, I said that the black leadership, this leadership is very important. It's even more important for a person that's going to have a legacy about it. That's why I'm saying it's very important leadership of this summit to Prime Minister Hun Sen. I think he will see to it himself all the agenda that is put forward and some of the strategic angles that need to be placed in there. The leadership that is proactive and effective in dealing with great power and enforcing the central role of ASEAN in shaping regional architecture, which could be essential in managing the risk of bifurcation, two sides. The key regional issues that can lead to the divisions and bifurcations of ASEAN, including the unfolding political crisis in Myanmar, the South China Sea dispute, and the Ukraine, as well as human rights issues and infrastructure development. And we just talked about the Indo-Pacific economic framework just now. We should not forget that BRI is now phase 2, and it's gaining even stronger and stronger traction in this part of the world. So Americans have a lot of catch up to do. I didn't want to go through the technical or the functional aspects of the summit. It's there, but if you compare to China, America, much ahead of the US, and this is something that during the championship you will hear more how China is going to help, including health cooperation, COVID, and all these things. So I stop here. There's many more to say, but I would respond to anything concern that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sotirak. Just 1 minute, Ambassador Sotirak. So your point is very clear that this year, under Cambodia's chairmanship, we can expect a joint statement, joint communique, unlike 10 years ago when we had a problem with that. So that's very clear, I think. And then just a quick question. By the way, the 5-point consensus and the code of conduct in South China Sea, they both are designed to resolve conflicts, right? But they both are not making much on Myanmar. Ambassador Sotirak, is there any plan in Cambodian government to engage with the NUG, the Opposition National Unity Government? Malaysia has taken a lead in engaging with the civilian NUG. Any plans like that in Cambodia? And also, what's the contingency plan if President Putin, and regardless of this Russia-Ukraine war, how it goes by November, it doesn't, regardless of that, for the rest of this year, I think President Putin will be boycotted by major world leaders wherever he goes. So what's the contingency plan in Cambodia if President Putin says he will attend and then the others boycott? What do you do?
Okay. First on NUG, let's me emphasize the Cambodian approach to Myanmar crisis in general term first. When all of us know that early day, Prime Minister Hun Sen visit Myanmar on his own initiative, and there's a lot of write-up with saying that this is a cowboy diplomacy or something like that. And then to me, this is happening because Prime Minister Hun Sen take the initiative to and take the opportunity to try to make the 5-point consensus implementable and explore. But the strategy behind is even more important. People often don't discuss this, and that is in my observation. Now, I think this is my view, that it's not the Cambodian government position. My view is that Cambodia employ a non-pressure approach to try to seduce Min Aung Hlaing to have buy-in, and not to pressure. So he want to go there without. Early on, people talk about he don't consult all the leader, and he went, but he uses as a way to seduce Min Aung Hlaing. He does not meant to undermine or underlook the importance of other leader, particularly consultation-wise. Later on he changed the position, but people did not see that so literally. But he have good intention. And another point is that when he go to visit, he did not intend to give legitimacy to the two leaders. He just tried to break the ice. He just tried to have a conversation and have a feeling and to also prep the envoy, which is Cambodian foreign minister also, to when they visit, to produce some concrete result. And this is not official, but I've been informed that he requests for the special envoy to meet the belligerent, I use the word belligerent, stakeholder, including NUG and others, ethnic armed groups and so on, and even people in prison, I've been informed unofficially that there is even a request from him to allow the special envoy to meet with Madame Aung San Suu Kyi, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi. Whether that is true or not, I don't know, but I was informed. So all these are, about meeting the NUG is also part and parcel, but you have to analyze the strategy Cambodia tried to not lure, but encourage to have a conversation first and then buy later. Including ceasefire. You hear early day Cambodia proposed ceasefire, and it appeared that they agreed with it, and then there's a setback from the junta. So definitely, if it's useful, if it's going to make the 5-point consensus implementable, meeting NBG is definitely part of Cambodia's strategy as well. But why is it not there in the front? Because Cambodia have a different strategy. That's my point. Now let's talk about your second point. Your second point, please tell me again about. I forgot your second point.
The contingency. If what happens if President Putin comes, or and then he's going to be boycotted by all the other world leaders for the rest of this year.
Yeah, but this is not only Putin. This is even President Biden. Although our friend Kavi said that ASEAN have a game plan with the U.S. by announcing the comprehensive partnership. President Biden are requested to attend all three summits, but whether his schedule allow him or not is also not very clear. Because back to back, I would hope that Biden would come to Cambodia, because just a summit, just 6 months ago, and now if he don't come, then we can talk about reliability, partnerships, and all this with the U.S. again. So I would probably think that he would come. But when he comes, you see, if he know that Putin's come also, suppose Putin come, and he have a very strong, U.S. have a very strong, unambiguous position with regard to Russia. They stop short in sending military troops as part of an intervention to Ukraine, but they also send military support, besides a harsh, sanctions against, economically speaking, against Russia. So for that sheer position, it may make him not coming to the summit if he knows Putin's come. So this is something that Cambodia have to factor in. That's why I said that there have to be a lot of shuttle diplomacy to try to, for me, I think Prime Minister Hun Sen open arm, invite everybody. He wants everybody to come. His legacy is an end now. We have to make this happening, It would be best if they all come. Whether they do anything else is another topic. But to me, I think that's issues that we should look into.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador Sopra. I think it would make sense if President Biden does join this summit season, he probably will go to all three, right? Not just one and then go home. It's a long way. 6 months from now, by the way, around the summit season, President Biden will turn 80 years old. He's 79 now. He'll be 80 on November 20th this year, around the summit time. So 6 months after having the second U.S.-ASEAN summit, it will be very interesting to see if he makes that long trip when he turns 80, around the time he turns 80 to the region. But if he does make it, I think it will be probably all three countries, unless there's some issues with the Putin attendance. This is, I think, the daunting question mark for Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand. The attendance. Let me move on this topic now to Dr. Rizal Sukma, Ambassador Rizal Sukma. Indonesia has invited, it's very clear. But what's the plan if President Putin says he will come, and then there's a boycott by the other world leaders, except maybe, of course, President Xi Jinping may not join that boycott? What's the Indonesia contingency in that case?
Well, first let me say that, those in the government, of course, it is their job, to hope for the best. So that's why, if you talk to them, you see their statement, they all say that things, still 6 months away. So hopefully the war will stop and then everything will be, normal and it's good. And then the summit will take place. And then, we try to resolve the world problem. But it is the job of think tanks like us, to really prepare for the worst, because, there are a number of scenarios here that, I think even the government officials are actually thinking very, very, seriously about the likelihood of one of those scenarios might emerge. Number one, let me say that after we sent the invitation before the invasion. Yeah, we sent the invitation on 22nd of February this year. Then the invasion actually took place on the 24th of February. So we sent the invitation to President Putin on the 22nd, and then immediately after a few days of the invasion, the Russian ambassador in Jakarta hold a press conference, and then where she basically confirmed that President Putin would come to the summit, in Bali, for the G20. But I think a couple of weeks ago, the spokesperson of the Kremlin basically said that President Putin would participate, but the nature of the participation has not been decided yet. Whether he would come, in person or through the video call or through other virtual platform is still not very clear. So yes, the questions whether he will, come in person or not, still not, answered yet. But the question of participation, more or less, has been quite clear that President Putin would participate, in the G20 summit, which will take place on the 15th and 16th November this year. So that's, I think, but President Jokowi also extended the invitation to President Zelensky. Again, we're not sure whether President Zelensky will be able to come, in person and then attend the G20 summit, in Bali as the host of Indonesia as the presidents of the G20 this year. Because of that, I think based on that, I think latest development, there are a number of scenarios that we are thinking very hard at the moment. Number one, of course, President Putin would participate through the video call, and because he cannot come to Bali, then we can expect something called the DC, Washington DC scenario. This is where the Minister of Finance, meeting. Then they all walk out. I mean, the G7 walk out when the Minister of Finance of Russia, started speaking, in that meeting. But after that, things, I think went back to the agenda that has been put on the table, and then continue the discussion on how they can, really implement those agenda. So that possibility, that scenario is one of the options that we are, I think, thinking that might happen, with regard to the G20 summit. And second, President Zelensky again, would address the G20 meeting like what he did in the UN Security Council through the video call. So, in that regard, so I think, so we can imagine the scenario like in the UN Security Councils where he gave a speech. The other possibility is that because U.S. president already made it very clear, it would be impossible for him to be in the same room with Putin, in person. So if President Putin decided to come in person, then of course we could also expect the so-called boycotts. So the leaders of the G7 and probably one or two more leaders would decide that they would not come in the first place. So they will not, be in the summit. In that context, of course, it's really a serious, I think, problem for the G20 because you can't call, a summit with 10 members as the G20 summit. So, if that is the case, then I think this is my personal suggestion. Indonesia should just call off the meeting and then announce that, the G20 summit of 2022 is cancelled. Because the great powers, the major powers, do not really care, to focus their efforts to resolve two key problems facing the whole world. Number one, post-pandemic economic recovery, and then number two, the implication of the war, in Ukraine, where I think we begin to see the real problems and the real sufferings of the real people because of these two problems. Look at what happened in Sri Lanka, and also what it did to prices of the food shortage, and also energy scarcity, and so on. So we are here actually, given responsibility to find a solution for that. So that's why Indonesia, as one of the largest emerging economies in the world, really want everybody to come to Bali and then try to really address these particular twin challenges that we are facing at the moment. But that require a creative thinking about the format of that meeting. So we need to have two rooms. One room, everybody can just discuss and then even scream at each other and then try to address the questions of war in Ukraine. The other room, I think we should continue with the working levels where I think the real issues are being discussed by relevant ministers and relevant working groups and relevant, engagement groups. So that's, one of the format that we might, I think also have to consider. So because it is impossible to expect everybody comes to Bali for the G20 and then nobody talk about the Russia's invasion, in Ukraine. So, Indonesia as the chair, I think we need to provide also a platform, a forum, for that, but in a way that will not derail or even destroy the real agendas that all G20 members must pay attention to and then try to find ways to work together to address them. So that's basically where we are at the moment with regard to the G20 summit. But if I may, I would like to comment on the summit in Cambodia. I think we should also remember the summit in Cambodia will also be an opportunity, or in fact, it is already in the timeline that ASEAN has. The high-level task force that was formed last year will submit its recommendations on two things. One on the ASEAN post-2025 visions, and then the other thing is that on ASEAN, on how to strengthen ASEAN capacity and institutional effectiveness. So I think this is something that we often overlook in this discussion about ASEAN at the moment. So the high-level task force actually focusing their discussion on these two key issues. But I think on the vision, so it's relatively easy. But ASEAN are very good in thinking about 20 years, 30 years from now. But on the second agenda, which is on the capacity and the institutional effectiveness, I think these are very critical issues that I think Ambassador Sutirak mentioned a number of challenges that ASEAN face, and then we also agree that ASEAN does have a number of challenges internally that need to be addressed. So that's why the summit in Cambodia is very interesting, because the high-level task force will submit their recommendation on how to address crisis management problem, how to address decision-making process, and how to address the need for streamlining the ASEAN-centered multilateral processes, and also how we can really address the questions of role of CPR, role of the ASEAN Secretary General, and other ASEAN organs. So I think hopefully this is also will add to a number of agendas that Ambassador Paul Sotirak has already mentioned. When it's come to the questions of whether President Biden would come to the ASEAN summit or not, I think if he missed that one, then it is the US, the one that lose a lot, in that process. It's different from G20. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rizal Sukma. Let me say this first. You introduced the agenda items. I think for the G20, this would be the pandemic recovery, and then the war in Ukraine. So I think these are salient and the most pressing challenges of our time in many ways. So that's good to put on the table that these agenda items. We also can look at agenda items for ASEAN-related summits and also for APEC in a moment. Dr. Rizal, so do you think that maybe Cambodia will end up setting the tone, because it's the first to go, right? It's the first. So if the leaders come to Cambodia, they likely will come to easier for them to come to Indonesia and then Thailand. So maybe Cambodia will end up setting the tone. And what you said about the modality is very interesting. So the best case scenario for ASEAN, Dr. Rizal, would be, it ends up being the platform for dialogue among all these, major powers, right? So you have Russia, Ukraine, and then all the Western Alliance, and then China and so on. And also what you said about the modality, the platform, I think it's instructive, and we have to keep this in mind as a kind of a think tank role. It doesn't have to all be in person. It could be a mix of in person and virtual, right? So if it can be worked out somehow by Cambodia, by Indonesia, by Thailand, together or separately, but together would be ideal. Same kind of platform. It can be flexible. Some can come, some don't have to come in person, but all are included and all participate. That would really be the best case for the summit season for the 3 ASEAN countries, because it would end up playing the role, the convening role, what ASEAN is good at, convening role, to bring the different conflict countries together in the same platform, and that platform could be flexible. It doesn't have to all be in person. So that's something maybe we can look towards in the near term, in the future. So if President Biden, if it's a long distance, he's too busy for whatever reason, President Putin and so on, if ASEAN can be the dialogue platform for a mix of in-person and virtual, perhaps that's something that we could start thinking about. So Cambodia, you think Cambodia could end up being the tone setter, the setter for how things would go, the tone and directions, if Cambodia sets it up? Or maybe Cambodia and Indonesia and Thailand should get together and maybe design a common platform, a flexible but common platform to engage these world leaders. What do you think, Dr. Sukma? And any other agenda items for the G20 besides pandemic recovery and the Ukraine war? And I'll also say this to the audience members that the floor is open for questions, comments. Dr. Sukma, you think Cambodia will end up setting the tone and direction?
Yes, that I think it's the different, the G20 framework and the ASEAN framework. With the G20 framework, I think we do have also those stakeholders, in the conflict, between Russia and Ukraine, which is the G7 members. We will have Germany, Italy, and UK, and also others who also I think have problems attending a meeting with in the same room with the President Putin. But we don't know how things will play out. So that's why I think one of the reasons why Indonesia's president really tried to clean his schedules and then went to Washington DC last week, in order also to try to convince President Biden that it is really important that President Biden would come and participate in the G20 summit. If probably this is only in the Indonesia's media, President Jokowi wrote in the guest book at the White House, see you in Bali, in November 2022, rather than other messages that he want to put in that guest book at the White House. So President Jokowi really emphasized that Indonesia, as the president of G20 this year, wants to see President Biden in Bali, and in that regard, I think U.S. participation and presence in Bali, would somehow also affect how other G7 members and American allies plan whether they will go or not, to Bali. So that's I think what we really hope for. In addition to these two big agenda, the very general agenda, there are, of course, with regard to the post-pandemic economic recovery. So the question is really, so we are asking ourselves, what are the path to recovery? So here I think it's very clear that the G20 2022 emphasized health, energy transition, and digital transformation as three key agendas, so that we can recover together, we can recover better. That's the slogan of the Indonesia's G20 for this year. So this is the three issues. In that context, I think summit of the G20 is only symbolic, basically, even though, of course, it's important, but it's symbolic, because the real works among the member states continue, to take place. So the technical working groups and also ministerial meeting will continue to work and then try to address these three agenda and other related agendas of the G20. If the summit doesn't take place, because Indonesia has to call it off because no commitment from say half of the members to come, then we should not be too worried about it because the working level will continue to work and then try to address those agenda. And the final, I think, point, Cambodia summit, especially the East Asia summit, is important in the sense that this is the place where you don't have all those say Germany, Italy, and other countries. Only a number of members of the G20, which is Australia, in I think in the East Asia summit, and then we have US, and Japan, and of course, China and India. So US, I think, in light of these so-called declarations on the new era and so on, it would give a very strong message if President Biden comes to a summit, East Asia summit in Cambodia, and then frame it, as part of this US, new commitment to engage ASEAN, as a whole, in that summit in Cambodia. The G20, that's actually a reflection of great powers or major powers' responsibility, to try to address world's problem. And then G20 is one of the forum where I think we need to focus on economic and other economic related problems that the whole world now is facing. So that's basically how I see this Cambodia's summit and how it relates to the question in the G20 summit.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Rizal. I will come back to you. Kun Kavi, let me turn to APEC and Thailand. And apart from the major theme for Thailand organizing APEC is biocircular green, so BCG. But beyond BCG, what are we looking at in terms of the agenda, Kun Kavi, for APEC? Do you have any sense of what the Thai government is trying to get out of APEC hosting this year? It's a major world meeting. The last time Thailand hosted APEC was 2003, and world leaders came, and it was a very prominent space for Thailand to shine. This time, what are we looking at? And also, what's your take on the dynamics of the Ukraine war being a spanner in the works of organizing these summits in Cambodia, Indonesia, and Thailand? Kun Kavi.
Well, thank you very much. Thailand is like Cambodia and Indonesia face the dilemma of the Russia-Ukraine war. I just want to refer back a little bit on the scheme that you talk about, Dr. Titinan. Actually, Thailand, Indonesia, Cambodia have already planned together. They issue recently a statement come out. It's the first time that three countries, the host of three summits, issue a joint statement saying that leave us alone, let us organize the summit. And the second point I want to address before I went to APEC is that ASEAN is a fulcrum for all major power to consult and turn confrontation to cooperation. Like Rizal Sukma has said that East Asia Summit could be the venues, because ASEAN, Dr. Titinan, you said we have convincing power, and Dr. Surin said that ASEAN is a fulcrum. That much is very clear. I'm confident that Biden will have to come. Otherwise, all things that he has done in Washington, hosting and all these promises, all the rhetoric will be gone in a whimper. And also, the fact that CPS, the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, is on hold is to provide his incentive that he would come to Cambodia. And of course, Dr. Titinan, you raised an important point. Can America, leader of America, President Biden, spend 10 days from, apart from the flying time, from November 10 to 19, exactly 10 days in the region. So he has to think about it. But of course, ASEAN-related meeting is very important, G20 and APEC. Now, APEC Thailand has a very ambitious agenda. You mentioned already BCG, which is the very encompassing preparing for the economic models. Now it's under discussions. As you know, this weekend, trade minister will have its meeting at Santara in central Bangkok. But there are two other issues that now that APEC meeting is considering. That is number one is safe passage. Safe passage. I think by the end of this meeting this weekend, I think all the economies will agree for the standard vaccine certificate so that people from APEC country can travel. I think that Thailand is working on, as you know, country in the regions depends largely on the revenues made from tourists, particularly Thailand. A lot of countries within Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific has already opened up. A second point, which is something that has been discussed, is FTAP, Free Trade of the Asia Pacific Agreement. So this is something ongoing. And Thailand has already put forward a proposal of -X is from private sector. At the moment, I think we still need further discussion. So working group are discussing heavily on this to push this forward. But in the end, Thailand is hoping that despite all the problems that Dr. Rizal Sukma has said, everybody has mentioned, Thailand hoped that Bangkok goal on BCG would come out, the declaration. Of course, we anticipate there will be some boycott, walkout. That is a normal diplomatic practice when the country from the opposite side take the floor. But Thailand is not worrying. We worry that whatever that has been working, continue, is a long process, should continue, and progress must not be stopped. I fully agree with Dr. Sukma that, leader has their own politics, if they don't come, fine, but working level would continue. And I think that is very important. That's what APEC is for. But Thailand also has additional purpose because it could be the time. Dr. Titinan mentioned 2003. It was a great opportunity to show off Thailand cultures and whatever. The Thai king have 3 state visits in 4 days from the United States, China, and also Russia. Whether similar or auspicious occasion can be repeated or not, I have no answer. As you said, 6 months are still ahead of us. There's a lot of preparation is going on now from the Thai side because Biden definitely, I think he would come because he will have to take up the next year chair of the APEC 2023. And President Xi Jinping has not yet visited Thailand officially. We are the last country, and I think he would come. So if he comes, it is highly likely that both leaders, this is my own take, that both leaders will also be making state visits so that King Rama X will have the opportunity to welcome the 2 leaders as well as other APEC leaders. So that's my take for the APEC meeting. One more issue that I think I would like to refer back to the ASEAN summit and the Cambodian chair. I think Cambodian chair will make progress on COC. Just to let you know, on the 24th or 27th May, there will be face-to-face on the COC working group meeting in Siem Reap. So that will be a very important issue to rejuvenate, the past 2 years due to the lack of progress because of COVID. Now I think the momentum will be on the COC, whether progress will be made on the second reading of the single draft. I will end here, Dr. Titinan.
Thank you very much, Khun Kavi. Could you elaborate a little bit on the FTAP, the free trade in Asia Pacific? How long has this been proposed and by whom? And what does it mean by -X? I think a lot of our audience members will not know it.
Yes, I mean, FTAP have been discussing for a long, long time, but we have not yet reached a consensus. Now the Thai private sector have proposed that whoever is ready should be part of FTAP. But then, the question is, what would be the advantage of FTAP now that you have CPTPP and also you have RCEP? So you must look for a new area, a very special incentive that is not included in this two big mega free trade agreement. So it must be maybe, in the area of really high qualities, like intellectual properties, something to do with lesser state enterprise. This is just my own take. So it's still a long way to go. But I think it's good. Thailand want to kickstart. This is why Thai private sector proposed this FTAP -X. Dr. Titinan.
Okay. Do you think that what you said very I think forward-looking, Khun Kavi, that maybe the APEC summit for Thailand, it may become an opportunity to showcase the country. And then I think harking back to the 2003, the state visits you mentioned. So this maybe APEC for Thailand, APEC 2022 could be turned into kind of a showcase in a similar way with the royal audience of state visits of major world leaders with new monarch King Ramatent. If that, do you have any sense that is the government's plan, is to use this opportunity to stage that kind of event? Because this would be very important. And then do you think that this would be affected by, it's not just Thailand hosting APEC on its own. It's ASEAN 3 countries hosting 3 major summits back to back. There's Cambodia, there's Indonesia, there's Thailand. So if it's just Thailand, then I can kind of imagine that this could happen. But with the Cambodia and Indonesia, would this kind of be determined out of Thailand's control a little bit? Because if the other leaders, they don't come to the Cambodia and Indonesia, unlikely they will come just to Thailand, right, on its own. What do you think?
Oh, well, this is a very interesting view. You must know that before the 3 countries agree on the dates between November 10th to 19 November, they spend months and months to discuss. And Indonesia decide that it should be in the middle so that most of the leader would come. So I think it's all depends on the desire of the leader, whether they would attend all 3 summit or not, particularly those who related to ASEAN, especially the East Asia Summit. That's for us is very important. And I think Thailand will use the APEC platform because it is the first time that in the post COVID-19 pandemic that leaders can meet face to face. We can showcase Thailand in all aspects, including the BCG, the new economic model that's the Thai government. So we will have to see whether all things that you mentioned will come into fruition or not. I hope that Thailand will succeed and duplicate the 2003 success. That is my dream, and I hope that Thailand could do that.
Okay, I'll just make a note here that it looks to me that the ASEAN-related summits and the APEC summit, they have much more overlap than the G20. The G20 involves a lot of external members who are not part of the APEC and the ASEAN-related summits. We have some time now for a little time left for the last round. And do you have a question, kind of question and comment from the audience? A member, Dr. Pankaj, is boycott of Putin's only option because engagement would be beneficial to reduce the destruction? It's a boycott of Putin only option because engagement would reduce suffering in Ukraine and also reduce collateral damage to the international economy. So maybe in this last round, and the floor is still open to questions and comments from our audiences, maybe in this last round we can kind of look at the picture of, we have a lot of challenges already before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. ASEAN had issues with the South China Sea, of course, and then the Myanmar coup. The Myanmar coup was really a showstopper in many ways for ASEAN because it forced ASEAN to come up with some kind of a dialogue, platform, resolution, especially when the UN and other international players deferred to ASEAN. So that was already big challenges. And then now we have the Russian invasion of Ukraine ongoing and very destructive, very high stakes. And what does this mean for ASEAN moving forward into the summit season? So I'll just make a first note and then I'll come around a little bit. I'll ask a question to our speakers. But the first note is that, I hate to say it, but it's really true. This is not ASEAN's war. I mean, this is the Russian war in Ukraine, and it's, it is, of course, violates the international law. It violates the United Nations Charter, and they have a lot of gripes and grievances on both sides. And we are over here in Southeast Asia looking at the war and how destructive. There's a lot of collateral damage indeed. So the question from the audience, Dr. Pankaj, in fact, reflects a lot of the views in the region, in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, that it would be beneficial to see the earliest conclusions of this war to limit more damage that will come out of it. So this is really existential, not just for Europe, but also, the effects, the adverse impact for us now. The food scarcity, high inflation, energy prices are soaring, is beginning to bite the pockets of the local populations in Southeast Asia. So I think this view is reflective of the question is reflective of the broader views in the region. Not the region's war, but of course is becoming a regional war in Europe with adverse global impact. Ambassador Sotirak, maybe I'll just come to you and say maybe, as a final reflection, observation, ASEAN is in a tough spot on its own already. I think issues of U.S.-China rivalry, and when the U.S. and China really go at it, it really forces ASEAN member states to lean to one side or the other. It's almost forced to choose sides. And we've already seen Cambodia, Laos, certainly. 10 years ago, Cambodia chaired ASEAN. There were some issues, controversies. And since then, the US also is becoming more assertive. Indo-Pacific strategy, the Quad, we haven't discussed in detail, the AUKUS, the Australia, UK, US cooperation to equip Australia with nuclear submarines, nuclear submarines, and then the Quad, vis-a-vis China. So where do we go from here? I mean, we have the summit season coming up. It looks a bit challenged and problematic. How can ASEAN regroup and regain its strength and cohesion? Is it time, and this is my own personal view, for ASEAN to look at more maybe unilaterals, not just the ASEAN minus X, the cliche, the old formula, but maybe the ASEAN 5, the original ASEAN 5 plus X. So if you look at the ASEAN original founding members, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, they seem to be more aligned on key issues. So if they kind of align on key issues, could then this become the ASEAN 5 plus X, meaning the other members who are ready to be aligned or in line, they can maybe join. How do we rejuvenate, revitalize, or if we need to revitalize? Dr. Sotirak, your broad reflection, and then I'll come to the Dr. Rizal Sukma and Kun Kavi Jongkitawan. Ambassador Sotirak?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this last but important question. Going forward, ASEAN now more than 50 years old. They're growing quite old, but they keep doing the same thing. They keep maintaining the modus of operandi, the same thing. They never do an introspections on themselves whether that modus of operandi serve the best interest of ASEAN, even in the immediate future, not to talk about long term. Dr. Sukma talked about high-level task force Vision 2025 already, but what about the already done? Have you do any evaluations of what benefit, what really the benefit on the ground that ASEAN produce? I think unless there is a mindset, leadership mindset about this, you will continue to see ASEAN operating this way. There are recurring issues all the time, but we never have a retreat to say once and for all we need to put our house in order, and that is to look at our modus of operandi using the charter as a basis. Even the charter said that every 5 years you should reform, you should review the charter and kind of make adjustment as we go. Things like non-interference, consensus. I'm asking those who care about ASEAN future to ask ourselves the question, are they still relevant in many of the hard security issues? For example, Myanmar, non-interference. Why should we refer to non-interference when we deal with Myanmar crisis? Why does it always have to come into play? Why don't we just leave that discussion aside? Because it's not going to go forward. So I'm asking you that if you just ask now, what is the future, what going forward? There are things that ASEAN doing very well, all the mechanism and initiative that set, no war, no conflicts erupted in a large scale and all these things. But we are not just our own region, when we look at the world, we need to see ourselves and we always want to be in a driver's seat. Is ASEAN centrality effective vis-a-vis external partner? I doubt it. I doubt that the American, frankly speaking, I want to be blunt, I don't think America is impressed with ASEAN with regard to centrality issues, We don't want to discuss anything that is too cumbersome sometimes or complex. We need to be comfortable in discussing these complex and hard security issues. We need to put ourselves in that shoe. We don't let time take care of it, And this is my point. So change the modus, review the modus of operandi, review the charter, make ASEAN more effective, try to make regional interests above individual state interests when doing things of transnational, transboundary issues, including the Mekong. For example, we didn't talk about the Mekong. Otherwise, ASEAN relevance is going down the sliding slope, in my view, And my last point about whether Biden would come to Cambodia or not, I think it's hinged on what ASEAN impressed the U.S. with regard to what is it that ASEAN offer the U.S. with regard to what the U.S. talking about the free and open Indo-Pacific, of which ASEAN have some relationship in terms of norm settings and looking at international rule-based order. But we need to be more specific about it, with the American, they big guy, they calculate based on their national security interests also. And so this is a hard choice that must be made now, for a good future of ASEAN in the next 5, 10 years. I stop here.
Thank you very much. So hard choices to maintain relevance, including perhaps some institutional reforms, reconsiderations. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sotirak. Dr. Rizal Sukma, Indonesia is the kind of de facto leader of ASEAN in many ways, not always, but in many ways. And it was a founding member. It's the largest country, third largest democracy in the world, the largest Muslim country in the world, just by the sheer size, the sheer weight, and the political stability at home. But going forward, ASEAN with these limitations, what's your kind of observation, reflection on how to maybe revitalize, rejuvenate, or ASEAN doesn't need much of that? Dr. Rizal Sukma.
Well, thank you. We don't have much time, so I will be very, very brief. First, again, I have to emphasize that the task of the high-level task force of ASEAN is not only, to come up with the post-2025 vision, but also to address the main challenge that we face that Ambassador Paul Sotirak mentioned, which is ASEAN capacity and institutional effectiveness. And that's, of course, can also lead to the recommendation whether we need to revise the ASEAN Charter or not, we need to do the amendment or not, and so on. And then what are the issues that we need to address and so on. So I think the high-level task force is still discussing that, I think, in a very extensive way. So hopefully that we can, I think, contribute to that. The think tank and the second track in ASEAN, I think should contribute the thinking and also ideas. Second point is that ASEAN, I think, even though we like to be a collective entity, but I think there is a problem here because we don't have a single view and a single policy on all issues. So that's why I do agree with Dr. Titinan when you said that probably we need also to start thinking about pragmatic groupings within ASEAN depending on what issues that we want to address. For example, we don't have to be always in the pack of 10 or 9 going somewhere, going here, going there together, while probably within that group of 9 or 10, some are not really comfortable doing A, but some are quite very comfortable doing B and so on. So this pragmatic alignment and grouping within ASEAN, I think, should be allowed, but of course keeping in mind the importance of informing each other about what are the agenda and what are the things that we want to do. And the third point on the symmetry of the 2022, so I think first it's very important for ASEAN to really have a sense of unity of purpose among the ASEAN countries, especially among the three, Indonesia, Thailand, and Cambodia, on 2 issues. Number one, on the stopping the war, in Ukraine. So I think ASEAN can use this ASEAN +1 meeting in Cambodia later on, and also East Asia Summit to emphasize ASEAN collective hope or expectation that there would be, I think, a stop to that war. So ASEAN should consistently send that message through ASEAN-related platform. Number 2, I think within the East Asia Summit, so ASEAN should also have unity of purpose in sending this message to both Russia and also US and its allies who are also members of the East Asia Summit. And finally, I think we should start thinking, or Indonesia should start thinking on how to create a new platform to renew the peace talk, between Russia and Ukraine at the sideline of the G20. And for that matter, I think we need to consult and also invite Turkey, if possible, so that Turkey can be facilitated to facilitate the peace talk, between Russia and Ukraine. But finally, I have a questions actually that will complicate the whole discussion. But of course, we don't have time to go into that. the summit in this year will be between 10 to 19 of November, right? But on the 8th of November, there would be midterm election in the US, and also I think the Communist Party Congress in China in mid-November, and how that say affect whether both Xi Jinping and President Biden participation in the ASEAN-related summit and G20 summit. I think that's a question for Kun Kavi, to explore and find some information that can enlighten us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rizal Sukma. I think your point about the different group formations is very instructive. So, for example, we in the ASEAN think tank community today we have three. So we have ISIS Thailand, CSIS and Indonesia, and then CICP Cambodia. Not all 10. We have actually a consortium of 10 ASEAN ISIS think tanks, but we don't always do everything as 10. However, there is one event, the major flagship event for ASEAN ISIS would be the Asia Roundtable, which is hosted normally by ISIS Malaysia. So I think it's a modality worth thinking about a lot more, Dr. Sukma, Dr. Rizal, that there should be some flagship events, but beyond that, the different ASEAN member states can do their own thing together in smaller groups or with other partners, as long as they inform each other of what they're doing, like we do among the think tanks. I think that's something that we should think a lot more about for the ASEAN member states. Kun Kavi, maybe come to you for the last couple minutes here, last minute or so. Going forward, I know that you are very kind of bullish or a little bit very optimistic on where ASEAN is going, despite all the challenges and so on. And that, I think we would like to see your optimism come to life and be realized. We all would like to see ASEAN moving forward.
I cannot hear you very well. Okay. Can you say that again? I cannot hear you very well because of the echo. Say that again one more time, please.
Yeah, no problem. We actually share, we would like to see your
I would just say
optimism.
I just try to answer that Dr. Rizal mentioned about the scheduling. I don't think there is any problems. Of course, they all realized long time ago that there will be elections on November 8th, and that the scheduling of the China, I think it's all filling in. Now it depends on the leader themselves to come or not to come. For me, they will come. I'm not worried because ASEAN is very important. I look at ASEAN as a half full bottles, and I think it's very important. ASEAN is perfect organization in that sense. And given the task force, high-level task force task, they have to look carefully because they are looking beyond 2025. And one of the key issues already Rizal talked about is the efficiency of the institutional arrangement. But one more issue that ASEAN has to ponder, that is its relation with external power, whether ASEAN will lift the moratorium on dialogue partner or not, because last year UK broke the rule and obtained dialogue partner, without any obstacle, because there are waiting lists of nearly 20 countries that want to be dialogue partner. There are other aspects, and I think the ability of ASEAN for the past 54 years, if people look at the whole evolution, ASEAN does change. Even though change comes slowly, but change comes surely. And it's fit in, try to get consensus. So I just mentioned just a few minutes ago, Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia already joins hands to make sure that they have successful summit that will promote and strengthen ASEAN centrality. That is why they came out with a joint statement. Indonesia pushed so hard and Thailand supported because they know that this is the chance for us to show off our relevance of the ASEAN and ASEAN leadership. That's what I want to say. Thank you, Dr. Titinan.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're a bit over time. As I mentioned earlier, we would really like to see your optimism of where ASEAN is going, how it's doing, moving forward, to come to life and be realized, Kun Kavi. Let's hope so. I want to thank all three speakers, Ambassador Pusotirak, Ambassador Rizal Sukma, Kun Kavi Chongkithawan for joining us, and our audience members. Our next event for ISIS Thailand will be Tuesday. We have a Bangkok governor election this Sunday, big election, and then on Tuesday, the 24th, we'll have an event to analyze that in person by ISIS Thailand. So thank you very much to all my friends and speakers and colleagues. It's great to see you online, and hopefully now that we can travel again, it looks like we'll see you in person, in the flesh before long. Thank you very much.